Good evening, everybody. It's Monday morning in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So it's not even a good evening, Chris. It's good morning, Monday morning in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, after a brutal Steelers loss on Sunday Night Football, delayed an hour and a half by weather. I'm joined by Chris Dell. Paul Zeise, who's normally in this chair, is under the weather this morning. So I'm with our sports editor, Chris Dell, to break this game down. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing good. Good morning to you as well, Adam. Just when there was about 25 seconds left or so in that game, right before the touchdown, I just kept thinking to myself that this is the ultimate Steelers type of win. And it ended up not being that. And it's just how quick things can turn on its head by just one play at the end there. But I know we have a lot to break down here, so I'm excited to do that.
Yes, there were a lot of plays before that to break down. Some offensive, questionable coaching, I think, on both ends. Some questionable execution. We're going to get into all of it here in a second. Before we do, just want to thank our primary sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Chris, you can make an argument that the Steelers deserved to lose this one. They were outgained 445 to 222. The second half, Dallas, I just thought was a much more physical team and kind of beat the Steelers at their own game. The Steelers were able to come up with some plucky plays, force the 3 turnovers, forced Dak Prescott into some really costly mistakes. But in the end, Dallas just seemed to have more, and it was one play at the end that they could have decided it, but Dallas was able to put themselves in position, but I think dominating the Steelers defense tonight.
Yeah, they did. I mean, obviously you had the 3 turnovers. You think that should be enough at the end of the day, but you mentioned the yardage total, the differential there. It's just too much to overcome. And just, the cluster of injuries continue for the Steelers here. It started with their offensive line the last couple of weeks. Then tonight, we lose Nick Herbig. We lose DeMarvin Leal. TJ Watt was in and out of the game as well. They just couldn't hold on at the end there. I think, yes, did they deserve this loss? Absolutely. Can you blame it just on the offense? I don't know. Maybe you could blame it on the defense as well. I think it was just an overall team loss, really, at the end of the day. Justin Fields, yes, it was his first multi-touchdown passing game of the season, but probably was his worst game of the season. He was very inaccurate. Before the midpoint of the fourth quarter, I believe George Pickens only had 1 catch for about 8 yards, finished the game with 3 catches for 26 yards overall. And I don't really know if Dallas did anything special to take George Pickens out of the game. Justin Fields was overthrowing him early and often. They didn't go to Pat Freiermuth much, if at all. I mean, he caught the touchdown on the shovel pass, but I believe Connor Heyward out-targeted Pat Freiermuth at the end of the day. I'm disappointed in not just the play calling by Arthur Smith, but just the execution by Fields, and that you got 2 clear top pass catchers in this offense, and you're not making them you're not making a concerted effort to get them the ball consistently. And when you're an inefficient offense like the Steelers are right now, with really no explosiveness at running back either, I mean, I would just be trying to force feed the ball into Pickens and Freiermuth. Those guys should be getting double-digit targets a game at minimum in this offense, and they didn't reach that tonight. And I think that's concerning when you're constantly trying to hit post routes to Van Jefferson down the right sideline. That's just not a winning formula, no matter how many turnovers you get. And we saw that tonight. And I think that this is really the game where you think about, the Dallas's defense was really bad coming into this game. Bottom 10 coverage grade unit by PFF, bottom 5 run defense, and the Steelers were not able to take advantage on it in either aspect of the offense.
And they're missing Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence as well. The 2 of their big pass rushers. I think they were missing a couple others, I think the broadcast mentioned. So they were down to arguably 3rd-string guys, and they were still able to get pressure on Justin Fields. He took 3 sacks on the evening. But I think he was pressured a lot more than that. So I think there's some of this is on the offensive line. Some of it is on – they had some pretty brutal drops tonight, Chris, but To your point, Justin Fields missed, I think, the chances that Arthur Smith gave him to throw down the field pretty consistently, several overthrows. If you hit one of those balls, Chris, especially in the first half, maybe you're not in a dogfight at the end. But he missed, and so I think this was not the night Justin Fields wanted to put on tape with Russell Wilson possibly coming back fully healthy this week. Talk a little bit more about what you saw from him tonight and where he kind of stands after this. We've talked consistently every week he seemed to get a little bit better. This was the first time that he got a little bit worse, and is this the excuse Mike Tomlin's going to use to go back to his veteran and Russell Wilson?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'm not sure if we know the answer to that yet, but I think that you look at just the underlying data for this game. Fields has started 5 games for the Steelers this season, and his worst 2 games in terms of, let's just use the PFF grades for now. That's not the end-all, be-all by any means, but there's a lot of different metrics, statistics, and factors put into that type of number. His worst 2 weeks of the season have come in his last 2 starts against Indianapolis and Dallas in that aspect, both in terms of an overall offensive grade and a passing grade. And you mentioned it with Russell Wilson close to coming back now. He's gotten a little bit closer. At least we know that for sure right now. Fields has to have a good game against the Raiders in week 6, because that's a defense that's been taken advantage of by even some of the worst quarterbacks in the league. And if Fields struggles against the Raiders on the road next week, then, man, like, you're talking about another primetime spot Sunday night against the Jets a week after that. And we know the Jets have maybe one of the best coverage secondary units in the league, if not maybe one of the top 2 or 3 in the league. And he could struggle mightily against that defense. If you're looking at a potential bad game against the Raiders, and what should be a nice spot for him, and then another down game against the Jets, then I think the conversation becomes real. And I don't know how much longer they can keep Russell Wilson on the sidelines. And I think it's definitely in play at this point, despite the Steelers still being here with a 3-2 record.
Chris, one thing I think we have to talk about with Justin Fields, he has that fumble in the first half. We've seen the CQ exchange issues. He had the fumbles last week in Indianapolis. I mean, this seems to be a thing with him, an inability to hold on to the ball, which undoes, I think, a lot of the good of, he has not turned the ball over with interceptions very much, but if you're fumbling and either short-circuiting drives, which has happened numerous times now, or losing the ball and then losing a possession and turning the ball over that way, it's starting to feel like that's becoming a little bit of a trend with him.
Yeah, I mean, even some of the throws, I think you just looked at the overall game. I mean, there's a lot of offensive line injuries going on right now, so the continuity isn't there. I mean, that's just the reality. You can't necessarily use that as an excuse. Like you said, the turnovers have been a consistent issue with him going back to his days in Chicago. And I think Tomlin, to his credit, has done a really good job in really limiting that this year and kind of altering Fields' game to an extent, kind of containing him in a way so he doesn't. Yes, he can make these explosive plays, but that often comes with the detriment of those turnovers, like we saw in those couple seasons as Chicago's starting quarterback. So I don't know how much the Steelers want of that. I mean, look, I still think Fields is a better option than what they had last year with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. Don't get me wrong, but you still need more. At the end of the day, you need more to win a home game against a Dallas team that was dealing with a lot of injuries themselves. I'll give the Steelers defense credit in a sense that, they had only given up 13 points until that final drive. They really took away CeeDee Lamb in the second half. He had a decent first half, didn't have a catch until I believe about 2 minutes left in the second half, in the fourth quarter, if that is. So I thought they did a good job of that, but Dak Prescott was still able to find his other targets too easily. Guys like Jalen Tolbert, Jake Ferguson, even Rico Dowdle had a career rushing game. Don't get me wrong. I play fantasy football. I liked Rico Dowdle in drafts this year, but he's not an elite running back talent by any means. And I thought he had it a little bit too easy on the ground today against the Steelers too. So, again, we're talking about the offense more so far in 10 minutes of this show, but I think you got to put it on the defense too, because they gave up way too many yards, way too many first downs. And I think letting a guy like Jalen Tolbert beat you in the end, that's not what you want as a defense in a primetime spot at home.
Yes, I agree. And I see everyone in the comments talking about the defense. We are definitely going to get to it. It was definitely a major component of this game. I just think the lightning rod is always the quarterback situation. So we got to get to that a little bit. Last question I'll have on that topic, Chris, is the broadcast talked about the clear visual dimension that Justin Fields is adding. There was a lot of design runs tonight. I think maybe more than they've run all season for him. And then they said, oh, this is what he brings to the offense. And then Chris Collinsworth just read off Russell Wilson's resume for what he's done. Sometimes it feels a little empty to me, the argument for, Russell Wilson. It is really about a Super Bowl he won 10 years ago. Sometimes it feels like, and I only ask that in the context of they're clearly running stuff for Justin Fields in this offense that they probably would not call for Russell Wilson. What is Russell Wilson going to do to compensate for the fact that he's probably not as mobile as Justin Fields?
Well, the only thing he can do is make the passing game more efficient. But can he do that with the makeshift offensive line that they have right now? I'm not sure about that. We had the report on our website right before kickoff tonight that our beat reporter Jerry Dulac, Steelers Insider, confirmed sources that the Steelers are indeed inquiring about a possible Davante Adams trade with the Raiders. Now, look, the Steelers are not on Davante Adams' short list, but obviously getting a high-quality receiver to come into the mix with George Pickens would help. And you think with more of a traditional pocket passing quarterback like Russell Wilson, that obviously would help the offense as a whole. You put a guy like Davante Adams next to Pickens and Freiermuth, I think getting Jaylen Warren back healthy would be huge for this offense as well. They have no big play ability in that backfield. Naji Harris was struggling all night long to really gain yards. And again, this is against a bottom 5 ranked run defense in Dallas that's been absolutely shredded by some mediocre backfield so far through 4 weeks coming into this game this season. So look, yes, in a perfect world, Russell Wilson can improve the efficiency of the passing game, but I don't know if that's the same Russ we're thinking about that did that for years back in Seattle. So it's a big question mark. I agree with you. I definitely don't think it's a given that Russell Wilson can just all of a sudden come in here and improve the Steelers' offensive play. I'm not convinced, at least.
Chris, you mentioned Najee Harris, 14 carries, 42 yards tonight. That's 3 per carry. I thought he was pretty brutal last week in Indianapolis. They've noted on the broadcast he's made a bigger impact in the passing game than he has in the running game. And look, I mean, this is something I talked about with Christopher Carter last week. It is a makeshift offensive line. He is getting contacted behind the line of scrimmage very often. There is only so much you can do as a running back to compensate for that. But he's also the bell cow and supposed to be the heart of this offense. And I have yet to see that from him through 5 games of a 17-game schedule, Chris.
Yeah, well, I think we know what Najee Harris is to this point in his career. He's a big bruising type of back that's going to get you those tough yards between the tackles. He's never really been an explosive rusher. I mean, you're talking about 3.9 yards a carry, 3.8 yards a carry. His first 2 years in the league, he was just getting a massive workload and getting tons of touches and tons of yards per game, and the offensive line was much better as well. You look at last year, he had a career best 4.1 yards per carry. Now it's down at a career worst this year, 3.4 yards. Talked about getting slimmer during the offseason. That has not resulted in explosiveness. I will definitely tell you that. Maybe he should have kept the weight on. I'm not sure. Obviously, guys like Jonathan Ward and Shamklin, I mean, they're only coming in to give Najee a breather and make sure he doesn't get worn out. But you figure that he would at least be able to – I mean, look, the Colts and Cowboys, I'll stress this again, like the last 2 teams that the Steelers have played, they are 2 of the worst run defenses in the league, and the Steelers could not take advantage of it. I'm not blaming just Najee, but obviously you have to point the finger to the offensive line, the play calling. But Najee at the same time, it'd be more ideal if he was in that 50-50 committee with Jaylen Warren. And I think the Steelers need explosiveness in any way they can get on offense. Will it be for a trade with a trade for Davante Adams? Will it be to get Jaylen Warren back? Because a guy like Jaylen Warren fully healthy, I think could really open things a lot for them in a game like this where they're really struggling to score points. So I think Najee is what he is, man. And I don't know if things are going to get much better for him with so many injuries on the O-line right now.
We also mentioned George Pickens, who was pretty much a non-entity in this game. 3 catches on 7 targets for 26 yards. 21 of those yards came on that catch in the fourth quarter to set up the Steelers' last touchdown. What do you say about him? I mean, he's stepped up for this offense frequently in the first several games, but he definitely looked frustrated tonight. You could see it in the body language, and you could see it in the box score.
Yeah, I mean, it's his, Tomlin's thing is supposed to be getting discipline out of his players and consistency, and they haven't been able to do that with George Pickens yet, right? I know there were some drops in this game by other pass catchers as well, but at the same time, there were some bad throws too, and I think you just get frustrated. I mean, we even saw last week with the Chicago Bears, DJ Moore, talented receiver, was sitting on the sidelines by himself, the last person to get off the field. When you're in a bad passing offense and you're just in it over and over again, and Pickens' entire NFL career has been with below average quarterback play. So I'm not saying it's excusable by any means, but I mean, are we surprised at this point with Pickens? I really think that, we know the Steelers made an attempt to try to get Brandon Ayuk. It seemed like they were the closest team in the league to doing that. What would it take for them to bring somebody else in? I mean, there's been rumors about the Browns, the way they're tanking, that they could trade Amari Cooper. Maybe not in division, but maybe they don't care at this point. I think there are other receivers besides Devontae Adams that could be dealt by the trade deadline as well. And the Steelers might want to start exploring those categories, because whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, they need other people out there rather than a slow Van Jefferson running deep routes, undersized Calvin Austin running intermediate routes. These things aren't working no matter who calls the plays, Matt Canada, Arthur Smith, or anybody else. So I think those are some of the issues they really need to address in terms of just getting some more talent into this offense as a whole.
Yeah, I think you're seeing the toll that having those guys as your second and third receivers is taking on Pickens, because you're just not drawing enough coverage off of him in a game like this. So they're in a tough spot, Chris. They're going to have to figure something out here before the NFL trade deadline, or I think this is what we're going to see all the way through the season as a theme. Last question I got for you on offense, Chris. Obviously, you gave up a lot of pressure tonight with we alluded to it at the top of the show, with most of the Cowboys' top pass rushers not in the game. Is it a 5-alarm fire for you with this offensive line that they just could not get much done in stopping the pass rush tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just reality at this point with the amount of starters that they've lost. What are you going to do about it? I mean, that's the real question, right? Like Arthur Smith, the type of scheme you're going to run. Are you going to need, we saw more tight ends on the field than usual with Connor Heyward and Darnell Washington, although I thought that maybe those guys should have been blocking more, and you still should have been trying to get the ball into Pat Fryermuth's hands more as well. I don't know what we're going to see there. I think you might see a lot more 12 personnel. We know Arthur Smith's like to run those packages in the past and previous stops he's been at, so that could be some type of a stopgap solution, at least try to do that or try to do something. But, I mean, we all know what the reality is, and I think that there's going to be different ways that Justin Fields and Russell Wilson try to overcome the offensive line inefficiencies right now with this team. So I don't know, man. It's tough because this has been an ongoing situation for Pittsburgh, and against Dallas, you mentioned it, with no Parsons, no Lawrence. Like, this isn't the type of pass rush you would expect to really give you issues, especially in a home spot like this. Just God forbid when they play against a team like the Jets. I mean, things could get a lot worse in a hurry there. So, I mean, kind of red flags up for me right now with that and how they handle that over the next couple of weeks, because it could really affect the rest of the roster from quarterback on down.
Let's get to the defense, Chris. Before we do, just want to thank another sponsor. It's Goldberg, Persky, and White. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky, and White. For over 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. I think it was kind of a tale of two halves for what was not working for the Steelers defense tonight, Chris. In the first, I'd say, the first half and early in the second half, you're giving a lot of big plays up to this Dallas offense, and then you're dodging the bullet at the end. But I think there was the one long pass down the field to Tolbert. There was another one. I think CeeDee Lamb had a long one. Let me just look in the box score here what their long catches were tonight. Tolbert has a long of 48. Jake Ferguson has a long of 27. CeeDee Lamb has a long of 27. Kavontae Turpin has a long of 34. Rico Dowdle had one for 22. So they're getting gashed on some of these big plays. And I think in the second half, the theme was they just seemed to be getting dominated up front. So I think it was kind of a whole of the defense issue tonight. Was that your assessment as well?
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers came in with a top 5 run defense grade per PFF, and they didn't look like it tonight. I mean, again, a guy like Rico Dowdle, I think he's got some burst compared to Ezekiel Elliott. I don't really think that's saying much, but when you look at his overall numbers so far this year, he had 87 yards tonight. It was his best yards per carry of the season through 5 games, 4.4 yards per carry, had his longest rush of the season in 13 yards, and got 20 touches, 87 yards. The most rushing yards he had in a game up to this point was 46, and that was against a Giants team where we don't look at their defense anywhere near where we view the Steelers' defense right now. Was also involved receiving the ball, so wound up with 100-plus total yards, first time in his career doing that too. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's an issue. Like, okay, like if it happens against like a James Conner, if it happens against a Breece Hall, you could be like, hey, you know what? The talent won out. They broke out a couple of big plays, but especially not against what's supposed to be a below-average Cowboys offensive line and kind of a no-name, undrafted journeyman running back. Rico Dowdle was never even really did much in college, to be honest. So I think that's got to raise some red flags. And obviously, we talk offense first and then defense. That's not to say that you have to point more blame to the offense in this game either. I think, like you said at the beginning, it's a well-rounded loss, like a well-deserved loss, really, in terms of what they tried to come out here and do. Yes, they got turnovers, but turnovers can be fluky and lucky week to week. Like, Adam, what would have happened if they didn't get those turnovers? What would the final score be here in the end, too? Because then you start to get really concerned about the short-term future of this defense as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If you don't get those big plays, this is a blowout, Chris. That's the answer. But we might have been out of here at, 12-15 if they had run the ball more and been able to lock this thing down faster. But I wanted to ask you specifically on that one long pass to Minkah Fitzpatrick or to Jalen Tolbert that Minkah Fitzpatrick seemed to make the same mistake that he did in the Chargers game where the corner passed off the receiver to Minkah, and Minkah was not there. Went for a touchdown for the Chargers, goes for 48 yards tonight. Has he put something on film there? What's your general assessment of where Minkah Fitzpatrick stands? This is yet another game where he is not involved in the turnover situation. It was other guys making plays, the big plays tonight.
Yeah, you're definitely right. It definitely was the other big guys making plays. I mean, TJ Watt, he's out there doing his thing. Got his 100th career regular season sack, so that was a big accomplishment there. Losing Herbig, that was obviously a blow, and losing Lille too, right? I mean, give some kudos where kudos is due. Like, Landon Roberts made an amazing play there at the end of the game, punching that ball out over the defensive line from Dowdle to set them back a few yards, and that's when you're thinking like the Steelers are really going to come out of here with the win. But it just wasn't enough at the end of the day. And a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick, like you bring up, I mean, I don't know what the Steelers are going to do about it. I think that's the issue. I mean, Joey Porter Jr., I think we're kind of satisfied with how he's been playing overall. But I think they need more consistency in the secondary too. And Minkah Fitzpatrick with a team high 10 tackles, but he is getting beat too frequently, like you said. And again, like, I don't know if this is a scheme issue, and I'm worried because they're having issues stopping the run as well. Jonathan Taylor had a very efficient game against them in week 4 with the Colts. And, yes, Joe Flacco kind of threw on them with ease last week, but let's also not forget that when Anthony Richardson came in the game, he was playing pretty damn well too, and he had looked god-awful in his first 3 starts of the season. So I know that it's been a struggle for Fitzpatrick, but it just seems like there's more than one hole there on the defense. And what are the answers on defense right now for the Steelers? Because you can point to offensive line injuries for Pittsburgh right now. You can point to Jaylen Warren being out. You can point to the quarterback situation. I don't really know where to point the finger. Is it the defensive coordinator at this point? Because you think the names on paper are good enough to keep this team in games. But I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss right now, to be honest, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with Fitzpatrick is a lot of people have the expectations of what he did in his first season here in 2019, where, I don't know, those first 5-6 games, he was generating a turnover every game. And then now you go, what, half seasons without him making those types of plays. And I think you could live with it. And I think you also can make the excuse for him that, yes, they've had him creep up and run defense. They've had him kind of out of position in a lot of situations because of the personnel around him. But, look at how often this has happened in his, whatever, this is his 6th season here. I feel like more often than not, we're making that excuse for him, which begs the question of what are you paying 27 or whatever it is $1 million to a safety for, when you could probably get another guy at a fraction of the price who is going to be faced with the same issues and have to compensate for them. So, I also wanted to ask you about Dante Jackson. He comes up with the interception tonight, turns away what seemed like a sure Dallas touchdown. Has he been an underrated addition for you, considering some people just kind of considered him a throw-in in getting rid of Deontay Johnson this offseason?
I mean, just bringing back to Micah Fitzpatrick for a second. I mean, it's crazy to think that you mentioned the 6 years here. I mean, 17 interceptions altogether in his first 4 seasons, had 38 pass deflections. The last two seasons, 3 pass deflections and 0 interceptions. He's not the player. I mean, you can't expect him to be the player that he was a few years back. He just hasn't been that so far. You mentioned Deontay Johnson. I mean, like, losing him is obviously a big hole in the offense right now too. So I don't know, like, what's going to happen in that situation, but I mean, what is really the answer going to be? I mean, I think it can be a get right game against the Raiders in week 6, because they benched Gardner Minshew at the end of that game there, and it could be Aiden O'Connell coming back. So I think there could be some hope there for the Steelers to have a bounce back game. But again, like, against a team like the Cowboys, you'd hope that they'd play better than they did tonight, because Cowboys have been kind of average at best so far this season.
Nearly 400 of you still on the live stream at 1:30 a.m. Pretty remarkable. So thank you for all that support. Chris, I want to get out of here by talking about the clock management at the end of the game, specifically the timeout. On the 4th down play, Mike Tomlin didn't like what he saw. I think he had, a feeling that play was going to be the game, and that there was no way you were going to get a field goal. And that, playing with 20 seconds left, playing to, try to move the ball for a field goal and kick it with, whatever time left was probably not going to happen. That's my read. I don't really blame him for wanting to have his defense set for the play that ended up determining the game, but he's been getting roasted for the clock management for that one. I thought Dallas was pretty questionable too, because they had a couple opportunities that they could have, wound the clock down to make sure there was no time left for the Steelers. What did you think of the clock management on both sides for the final minute there?
Yeah, well, I mean, these are two head coaches that have never really been known for their quality decision making when it comes to timeouts and challenges. So, didn't really surprise me. I think you have to save at least one timeout just in case. I mean, I'm just of the belief that you shouldn't be using second half timeouts unless it's like an utter emergency. Even if you're confident in your defense, like, let the defense go out there and cook. You could be giving the offense an advantage by letting them kind of, reset and look at things from a different perspective. And I thought that the Steelers kind of had the Cowboys on their heels after that play, and maybe they should have just let that play ride out. I mean, this is very minuscule. I feel like I get nitpicky like this as a fan, but really, like, at the end, they didn't have to do the scrum play like at that time. But they could have attempted at least one more pass to try to get 15 more yards down the field and out of bounds. It wasn't 4th down. I didn't know why they went to that as early as they did either. I mean, even the first pass that Fields threw, there was no chance that was connecting. It should have been intercepted. So I'm also a little not just the game management aspect of it, but the actual, like, what's the plan when we need to get 50 yards and in field goal range to tie the game? I think there should be some better plays in the playbook for that type of scenario. Do you blame Justin Fields? I see a lot of Matt Canada comments here on the stream. I don't think it's gotten that bad to this point yet. I definitely think there's some cause for concern. But yeah, man, like I want to see more in those types of situations. And I think that the extra timeout would have helped a lot, because then you could have thrown something directly over the middle of the field for 20 yards. You could have really given yourself a chance to get in the field goal range. All it takes is 2 passes to do it. And they weren't even able to put themselves in a position to do that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it would have been interesting to see at what range they let Boswell kick it. I mean, do you let him kick it from 60? Do you let him kick it from 65? Is that what you're planning for? But we didn't get to see it play out, because you're right, they did not have that timeout. I'm still okay with it, but kind of is what it is. Chris, any final thoughts? I think for me, it's just that they don't have the personnel to win the way that Mike Tomlin seems to want to win, which is 4 yards at a time. They're not running the ball that way. And if they were, I think it would be a different conversation of being conservative with Justin Fields. But they're not. And Justin Fields is the playmaker in this offense right now, to me, for better or worse. So don't you have to adapt the play calling to him, rather than saying, this is how I want to play, and we're going to try to force Justin Fields into that type of mold, even if we have a patchwork offensive line and really a horrible receivers room beyond George Pickens.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm worried about, look, I play a lot of fantasy football. I write a fantasy football column for the Post-Gazette. I'm a little concerned that, like, for fantasy football, it'd be great if you opened up Fields and just let him run loose and get wild and all that stuff. But I thought I saw a lot of that in Chicago. And when he did that, it was great for fantasy and he put up a lot of points, but there was a lot of turnovers that came with it. And that's essentially why he was run out of town. I don't think that they're going to do that with him. Because look, at the end of the day tonight, they lost a close game. And Tomlin's going to be like, look, you give me a chance to win it with one play on defense. Tomlin, whether it's his ego or not, he's going to take that chance every single time. So as much as we want to see that as fans of the game and more offensive excitement to that extent, I just don't see Tomlin doing that. Like, I don't want to assume rational coaching, if that's what you call rational coaching. I don't even want to assume that they're going to think like that or do that, because that's not who they are. And I think that they kind of know that, like, they need to win these ugly games. And, hey, this came down to one play. We lost the game. Next time it comes down to one play, hopefully it goes in our favor and we can finish 9-8 again, I guess. I mean, that's what it's looking like right now, 3-2. So, people talking about who should they get, maybe when Roman Wilson comes back, it adds a little spark to the offense. I think that's a guy you can look to for some hope in the next couple of weeks. I think, again, like, from a play calling perspective, the one thing that has frustrated people with Arthur Smith over the last couple of years is that even last year in Atlanta with Kyle Pitts, like, he was constantly taking Pitts off the field, their most talented tight end. He was running guys like Mecole Pruitt, Jonnu Smith. You'd see them catching touchdowns every other week. Like, he wasn't giving Bijan a full workload. And it's like, you want to put the ball in the hands of your best players, even if you have to force feed them the ball. And I think in this game, like, I want to see Pickens come away with double-digit targets. Like, at least keep him somewhat happy. I want to see Freiermuth get close to double-digit targets, because I feel like he's by far and away their second best pass catching option. So, like, who can they bring into this offense? Like, Roman Wilson and Jaylen Warren. If you can get those two guys back in here healthy, I think that could actually make somewhat of a difference here. But they might still be multiple weeks out. So I don't even know if that's an answer here for the next 2 weeks for the Steelers.
Well, Chris, I know you got some editing to do, so thanks for stopping by. We're going to have a lot more reaction coming up here on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel, as well as our podcast network. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We're going to have post-game from the stadium. We're hoping. We'll see. The guys, it's a bit late night there at Acrisure Stadium from Jerry Dulac, Ray Fittipaldo. Christopher Carter will be back on the North Shore Drive on Monday. So subscribe, and we will talk to you again next week.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.